And of course, I then explain the story of Helen's marriage. Helen, the most beautiful woman, sought after by many Greek kings. And when they got together to fight over her, it was agreed among them that whoever got her, and the rest would be loyal. So the pact was made before she chose, and she chose King Menelaus, brother of an even more glorious king, Agamemnon, and she married Menelaus, and all was well. And these other Greek kings, who found themselves rocking up on the plain of Ilium in their ships later on, never thought that they would have to do anything other than attend her wedding. So all went well until there was a visit from these chaps here with the birds on their head. And Helen fell for Paris, or Paris for Helen, or perhaps it was simultaneous. We don't exactly know. Helen does blame herself in the course of Homer's account for the whole thing, as well she might, with 10 years' worth of warriors being killed under her nose. It seems reasonable that she would wonder what she did by running off from King Menelaus and rocking up here in Troy in this admittedly gorgeous palace. So I then go on to explain who these people are, and Agamemnon, as the big cheese, gets a little wedge of cheese there, which is never entirely clear what that is until I invite somebody to draw a mouse, and then it's clear that he is the big cheese. And I have a little stab at telling people what a horribly dysfunctional family Menelaus and Agamemnon come from, and how their father and their uncle fought over a woman, and how their father ended up feeding their uncle his children, the cousins of these famous kings, in a stew. And so they arrive, these kings, already with a pretty horrible story on their shoulders, and it's not surprising that they get themselves into trouble with their fellow commanders. And the story of the Trojan War is as much a story of the Greek commanders disagreeing with each other as it is a story of them fighting the Trojans and trying to get Helen back. And I then usually wander off into the Second World War and talk about General Patton and General Montgomery and any generals you please, most of whom would rather have seen each other dead than the enemy defeated. And I try and explain that this is our first account of the rivalry of generals, the jealousy of generals, their envy being a lot stronger than their hatred of the enemy. So then we have a little list of some of the famous warriors and get to know a few of them, including the ugliest man in the Greek army, who gets a special place. And somehow the Parthenon gets into the story in terms of how it is that classical Greece looks back across a Greek Dark Age to the Homeric world, of which this is the end. A glorious world, Mycenae, an incredibly beautiful palace, King Agamemnon's palace, but this is the end of a superb era, a glorious era which ends shamefully in a horrible and stupid war in which almost everybody gets killed. So really it's a story about bringing a civilization to an end in the nastiest possible way. We get some digressions here. I'm beginning to explain the epithets that Homer habitually uses for different characters and different groups. At one point in the opening 50 lines, the Greeks are referred to as the strong, grieved Achaeans, and I'm always impressed if somebody knows what a grieve is, which soccer players know as a shin pad. So, and there's a little temple down here, and I explain the origins of the trouble in the Greek camp in the first book. When the ships draw up, Agamemnon is foolish enough, actually Achilles is as much responsible as Agamemnon is, to grab an easy target. Easy prey is the temple of Apollo, vulnerable on the plain of Ilium outside the city. And here, believe it or not, is the priest of Apollo, Chryses, with his staff, which has on it the ribbons of Apollo blowing in the breeze. This is supposed to be a goat, a sacrificial goat, trying to explain that the gods are appeased by certain parts, thighs, the thigh bone of a bull and the thigh bone of a goat, and they're very disappointed if you burn something less odorous. And up here on Olympus, which we'll get to shortly, the smell of these wonderful sacrifices pleases them or displeases them. But this is the temple of Apollo, Apollo, one of Zeus's offspring, who is helped to build Troy. There was no way to explain the glory of Troy, the magnificence of its walls, except by assuming that some god had taken part in the actual building. So Apollo's temple is out here on the beach, a nice spot, and there are, behind the temple there's accommodation not only for the priest, but for his daughter, it seems, because the first thing the Greeks do is ransack the temple, which they shouldn't be doing anyway, and insulting the god, and running off with the daughter of Chryses, because that's really what they're here for. They're here for the girls. Like all armies, they're here to seize girls, and they seize as many as they can find. And most of the quarrels among the Greeks are less about glory, although they do quarrel about that, than about girls. So they make the terrible mistake of grabbing the daughter of the priest of the Temple of Apollo and bringing her back here to the ships. And then the trouble starts when poor old Chryses comes to Agamemnon and says, here's lots of ransom, please can I have her back? And Agamemnon says, no, you can't have her back. And trouble starts between the Greeks in due course.